What if I told you that 85% of your failures in life, in your career, your relationships, your dreams, have nothing to do with your intelligence, your skills, or how hard you work? What if the real problem is something you do every single day, something you think you're already good at? I'm talking about communication. And before you click away thinking, I already know how to talk to people, let me tell you a story that will haunt you. Dr. Sarah Chen was one of the most brilliant cardiac surgeons in Boston. Her hands had saved hundreds of lives. But one Tuesday morning, a young nurse named Miguel approached her in the hallway. He was holding a patient's chart, and something in his eyes seemed off. "Dr. Chen," he said, "I just wanted to mention something about Mr. Patterson in room 412. His vitals look fine, but something feels wrong." Dr. Chen was running late for surgery. She glanced at the chart. The numbers looked normal. She nodded quickly and said, "The data looks good, Miguel. Keep monitoring him." 4 hours later, Mr. Patterson went into cardiac arrest. He died before they could reach him. Miguel had noticed the patient clutching his chest in a specific way. He'd heard a tremor in the man's voice when he said he was fine. His gut, his instincts, his years of watching patients, all of it had been screaming that something was wrong. But he couldn't translate that feeling into medical jargon. And Dr. Chen hadn't given him the space to try. She listened to the data, not to the human. This book, The Art of Resonance, changed everything I thought I knew about communication. And today, I'm going to share the most powerful ideas that could transform your relationships, your career, and honestly, your entire life. The Great Illusion. Here's the first truth that shattered my understanding. Communication is not about words. It has never been about words. Research shows that only 7% of emotional meaning comes from the actual words you use. 38% comes from your tone of voice. And a staggering 55% comes from nonverbal cues, your facial expressions, your posture, your presence. Think about that. You've spent your entire life perfecting the smallest piece of the puzzle. You choose your words carefully. You rehearse important conversations. You craft emails with precision. And then you wonder why people still misunderstand you. Why conflicts keep arising. Why you feel disconnected from people you love. Here's why. You've been treating communication like sending a package. You wrap your thoughts in words, hand them to someone, and expect them to unwrap it perfectly. When they don't understand, you assume they're the problem. But communication is not a transaction. It's not a transfer of data from one brain to another. Communication is the art of creating a shared reality. When two people truly connect, something remarkable happens. Research from the Max Planck Institute showed that during deep conversation, the neural activity of two people begins to synchronize. Their brainwaves start to mirror each other. Both brains release oxytocin, the hormone of trust and love. You're not just exchanging information. You're merging, however briefly, with another human being. This is why a single conversation can change the course of your life. It's why some people make you feel alive after just 5 minutes, while others leave you feeling drained after hours of talking. The lost art that changes everything. Carl Rogers, the legendary psychologist, spent decades studying what makes human connection work. And his conclusion was almost absurdly simple. The greatest gift you can give another human being is your complete attention. Not your advice. Not your solutions. Not your clever responses. Your attention. But here's the problem. Most of us don't actually listen. We wait for our turn to speak. Let me show you the spectrum of listening, because this is where everything changes. Level 1. Passive listening. Sound enters your ears. You can repeat back what was said if asked. But your mind is elsewhere, on your phone, your thoughts, your next meeting. You're physically present but mentally absent. This is how most people listen most of the time. Level 2. Selective listening. You're filtering for information relevant to you. Your partner tells you about their day, but your attention only spikes when they mention something that affects you. You're treating them as an information source, not a human being. Level 3. Attentive listening. You're genuinely paying attention, following the narrative, noticing emotions, asking questions. This is where good listeners operate. But there's still something missing. Level 4. Deep listening. This is what Rogers was describing. You're not just paying attention, you're entering their world. You're setting aside your own perspective, your judgments, your mental chatter, and allowing their experience to fill your consciousness. This sounds mystical, but the neuroscience is clear. When we listen at this level, our brain activity literally mirrors the speaker's brain. We're not just understanding them, we're becoming them. So why is deep listening so rare? Because of something called the default mode network in your brain. It's constantly running, telling you stories about yourself, planning your response, relating their story to your experience. Even when you think you're listening, part of your brain is composing what you'll say next. Here's how to break through. Mental imaging. When someone speaks, don't just process their words, visualize their experience. If they're telling you about a stressful commute, actually see the traffic. Feel the frustration. A Stanford study found that listeners who do this show 40% greater recall and are rated as significantly more empathetic. The echo practice. Before you give your opinion, reflect back what you heard, not just the facts, but the emotions. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're not just frustrated about the deadline. You're feeling like your hard work isn't being recognized. Is that right? This simple practice proves you were paying attention. It gives them a chance to correct any misunderstanding. And most importantly, it makes them feel seen. Your body never lies. Here's something humbling. People form judgments about you within milliseconds of meeting you, before you've said a single word. Research shows we assess trustworthiness, competence, and likability within 100 milliseconds of seeing a face. This isn't superficiality. It's evolutionary survival software. For millions of years, our ancestors needed to assess quickly whether a stranger was friend or foe. We're the descendants of the best body language readers in human history. Your body is constantly communicating, whether you intend it to or not. And it often communicates more honestly than your words. You can lie with your mouth. It's much harder to lie with your entire nervous system. Think of your body as an orchestra, and your words as the conductor. When they're aligned, the result is beautiful music. When they conflict, cacophony. Your listener won't know why, but they'll feel that something is off. You say, "I'm really excited about this project," while your shoulders are slumped. You say, "I'm not angry," while your jaw is clenched. You say, "I'm listening," while your arms are crossed and your eyes drift to your phone. The most important principle isn't any particular gesture. It's congruence, the alignment between what you say and how you say it. And here's the key. Congruence cannot be faked. If you try to artificially adopt confident body language while feeling anxious inside, the incongruence leaks through. You'll seem performative rather than genuine. The path to congruence is inside out. Cultivate genuine presence, and your body will naturally express it. The architecture of clarity. There's a story about physicist Richard Feynman. A journalist asked him to explain a complex physics concept in simple terms. Feynman thought about it and said, "I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it." Days later, he came back and admitted, "I couldn't do it." That means we don't really understand it. If you cannot explain something simply, you do not truly understand it. Yet most of us do the opposite. We hide our uncertainty behind complexity. We use jargon to signal expertise. We pile on words hoping quantity will compensate for clarity. This happens because of something called the curse of knowledge. Once you know something, you find it almost impossible to imagine not knowing it. Here's the framework that fixes this. It's called CLEAR. C. Core message first. What's the single most important thing you want them to understand? Start with that. Not with background. Not with context. The core message. L. Language of your audience. A brilliant engineer explaining a product to investors must speak about returns and market opportunity, not technical specifications. A doctor explaining a diagnosis must speak about lived experience, not medical jargon. E. Examples and analogies. Abstract concepts float away. Concrete examples stick. Don't say, "Our new process will improve efficiency." Say, "You'll finish your reports in 1 hour instead of 3. That's 2 hours back in your day, every day. A. Anticipate questions. Before you communicate, imagine their internal monologue. What will confuse them? What objections will arise? Address these proactively. R. Ruthless editing. After you've composed your message, cut it in half. Then cut it again. Every word that doesn't serve your core message is noise. And here's the most underrated tool: silence. Research found that the most successful negotiators use significantly more pauses than average ones. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it. But strategic silence is powerful. When you make an important point, pause. Let it land. When you're asked a difficult question, pause. Think before you speak. Silence is not empty. It's full of meaning, the crucible of difficult conversations. Nobody wakes up hoping for a difficult conversation. We postpone them. We rehearse them obsessively at 3 a.m. We send passive-aggressive emails instead of picking up the phone. We hint and hope the other person figures it out. And when we finally have them, we often make things worse. Voices rise. Defenses go up. Words are said that can't be unsaid. But here's the truth. Difficult conversations are not the problem. Our approach to them is. What if I told you that the same conversation that could destroy a relationship could also transform it? That conflict, handled skillfully, actually deepens trust. Here's why we fail. When we perceive a threat, and difficult conversations qualify, our amygdala initiates fight or flight. Cortisol floods our system. Blood flows away from our rational thinking brain toward our muscles. Just when we need our highest abilities, empathy, nuance, long-term thinking, our brain downgrades us to survival mode. This is why even intelligent, emotionally mature people become irrational in conflict. It's not a character flaw. It's biology. The first key: manage your own nervous system. If you're in fight or flight, no technique will save you. Use the break protocol. Breathe. 3 slow, deep breaths. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and counteracts the stress response. Recognize. Name what you're feeling. I notice I'm feeling defensive right now. Research shows that simply naming an emotion reduces its intensity. Examine your story. You don't respond to events, you respond to your interpretation of events. Ask yourself, what am I assuming about their intentions? What might I be missing? Align with your purpose. What do you actually want from this conversation? If your real goal is to punish or prove you're right, postpone until you find a constructive purpose. Kindness as default. Assume positive intent, even if their behavior hurt you. Most people who hurt us are struggling with their own challenges or operating on incomplete information. Kindness disarms defensiveness. Then structure the conversation using connect. Create safety first. Signal that you're not there to attack. I value our relationship, and there's something I need to talk about. My intention is to understand your perspective and find a way forward that works for both of us. Own your perspective. Use I statements, not you statements. There's a world of difference between "you never listen to me" and "I often feel unheard in our conversations, and I want to understand why." Navigate to their world. After sharing your perspective, genuinely seek to understand theirs. Help me understand how you see this. Then actually listen, not to prepare your rebuttal, but to genuinely understand. Name the disconnect. It sounds like you felt I was being dismissive, while I thought I was being efficient. That's a real disconnect we need to bridge. Explore solutions. Only now move to problem solving. What could we do differently? Commit and close. Clear commitments. When will you check in to see if it's working? Here's a truth that took me years to understand. Relationships without conflict are not healthy relationships. They're relationships where someone is hiding. Conflict, when handled well, is how we build the trust that comes from knowing we can disagree and survive. The empathy advantage. In 1994, a 14-year-old named Christian Picciolini was standing in an alley in Chicago when a man approached him. "Don't you want to be part of something important?" Christian was lonely. His parents worked constantly. He felt invisible. Within months, he became one of the most influential young leaders of the American neo-Nazi movement. But decades later, Christian became one of the world's most effective de-radicalizers, helping hundreds leave extremist movements. His primary tool? Empathy. He said something that sounds paradoxical. "When I finally left the movement, it wasn't because someone defeated me in a debate. It was because ordinary people showed me kindness I didn't deserve. A Jewish boss who gave me a job, a gay coworker who became a friend. They didn't try to change my mind. They just treated me like a human being." Empathy is not agreement. You can deeply understand someone's perspective and still disagree with it. Empathy is not weakness. Empathetic people often set the clearest boundaries because they understand themselves and others with precision. Empathy is the ability to accurately understand another person's experience and communicate that understanding back to them. There are 3 channels. Cognitive empathy. Understanding what someone is thinking, their beliefs, reasoning, mental models. Essential for negotiation and persuasion. Emotional empathy. Feeling what they're feeling. When a friend shares devastating news and you feel weight in your own chest, that's emotional empathy. This creates connection and trust. Compassionate empathy. Understanding plus feeling plus a desire to help. This moves us from understanding to action. Here's the reflect practice. Receive without judgment. Don't evaluate or relate to your own experience. Just receive. E. Enter their world. Mentally step into their situation. What would it feel like to be them? F. Feel the emotion. What's the emotional texture? Fear? Frustration? Hope? L. Listen for what matters. Beyond the surface, what do they really need? E. Express understanding. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed because you have so much responsibility and not enough support. C. Check. Am I getting that right? T. Thank and transition. Acknowledge the sharing before moving forward. Here's something powerful. In a world where AI can do more and more cognitive tasks, empathy is becoming one of the most valuable human skills. A 2022 study found that 93% of employees would stay longer at a company with empathetic leadership. The most effective leaders, negotiators, and communicators share one trait: they make others feel deeply understood. The art of feedback. Let me tell you about the worst feedback I ever received. I was 24, 3 months into my first job. I'd worked nights and weekends on a presentation. I was proud of it. My manager called me in. He didn't invite me to sit. He said, "That presentation was embarrassing. You need to figure this out fast, or this isn't going to work." Then he said, "You can go." No specifics, no guidance, no acknowledgement of effort, just a devastating verdict. I learned nothing useful. I knew I had failed, but I had no idea how to succeed. Years later, I experienced something different. I'd made a significant mistake on a project. My mentor Catherine invited me to coffee. She started, "This is hard, and I know you're probably being harder on yourself than I'll ever be." Then she asked me to walk through my decision-making. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I can see how you got there. Given what you knew, your reasoning made sense. But here's what you didn't know." She explained the context I'd been missing. Then, "Next time, before you make a call like this, can we create a check-in point?" Would that feel supportive or micromanaging? I left feeling better. Not because she spared my feelings, she was clear about the impact. But because she treated me like a capable person who had made an error, not a fundamentally flawed person. That's the difference between feedback that destroys and feedback that develops. Here's the gift framework. G. Ground in good faith. Before any critique, establish positive intent. I'm sharing this because I know you're capable of excellent work. I. Identify specifics. Vague feedback is useless. "This needs improvement," tells them nothing. The executive summary should be cut in half. It buries the key recommendation, gives them something actionable. F. Frame for growth. Focus forward. For the next version, I'd suggest growth framing signals this is about development, not judgment. T. Test understanding. Does this make sense? I'd welcome your thoughts. And here's the channel question. Sometimes the right answer is don't give this feedback digitally. Logistics and light feedback can be digital. Substantive and sensitive feedback should be synchronous. Stories that stick. In 2009, researchers bought 200 cheap objects from thrift stores. Average cost about $1.25 each. Then they hired writers to create fictional stories about them and listed them on eBay with the stories attached. Objects purchased for $129 total sold for nearly $8,000. A ceramic horse bought for 99 cents sold for $62.95. The objects didn't change. What changed was the meaning, and meaning was created through story. When you hear a good story, your brain synchronizes with the storyteller's brain. Stories trigger cortisol during tense moments, focusing attention. They produce oxytocin during connection, promoting trust. They release dopamine during triumph, reinforcing memory. A well-told story literally changes the chemistry of your audience's brains. Research shows that data wrapped in story is remembered 22 times more effectively than data alone. Here's the story framework. S. Set the scene. Establish context quickly. When, where, who. T. Tension introduced. What's at stake? What obstacle exists? This is where attention locks in. O. Obstacles and actions. What happened? What went wrong? This is the journey. R. Resolution. How was it resolved? Why? Your point. What's the takeaway? Use this everywhere. In presentations, persuasion, teaching, leadership. The person who can tell the right story at the right moment has a superpower that spreadsheets can never match. The digital paradox. Let me tell you about a moment that changed how I think about modern communication. A woman named Priya was sitting in her apartment in Mumbai, staring at her phone. She just received a text from her husband of 12 years. 8 words. I think we should talk. I'm not happy. For 3 hours, she agonized. She drafted 17 responses and deleted them all. She cried. She imagined worst-case scenarios. Then her husband came home. Hey, he said, setting down groceries. Did you get my message? I was thinking we should talk about taking a vacation. Work has been stressful. I'm not happy with how little time we've had together. That was it. He wanted to plan a trip. The talk was about booking flights. 3 hours of emotional torture because of 8 words stripped of every human signal. This is the paradox. We have never been more connected, and we have never been more misunderstood. We send 500 billion emails per year. We exchange 65 billion WhatsApp messages daily. And yet miscommunication in workplaces costs companies $62.4 million per year on average. Here's why. In face-to-face communication, only 7% of emotional meaning comes from words. The rest comes from tone and body language. In digital communication, those channels are either severely constrained or entirely absent. All that arrives is the skeleton, the words, without the flesh. And here's what's worse. Research shows people interpret ambiguous digital messages negatively. When we can't see a smile, we assume there isn't one. When we can't hear warmth, we assume coldness. Your recipient's brain is looking for threat signals and, finding no reassurance, often assumes they're there. Here's the digital warmth toolkit. The warmth sentence. Before anything else in a professional email, write one sentence whose sole purpose is warmth. I hope you had a good weekend. Did you end up taking that hike you mentioned? Research shows emails beginning this way are 50% more likely to receive responses. The tone tag. Make explicit what would be implicit in person. Instead of, we need to talk about the Johnson account, write, when you have a chance, I'd love to brainstorm about the Johnson account. No urgency, just want your creative input. The charitable assumption declaration. I know you're probably slammed, so no rush. I'm sure there's context I'm missing. Can you help me understand? Voice notes. When text feels inadequate but a call feels excessive, voice notes carry your tone. Text is for logistics. Voice is for relationship. The video default. For important conversations, turn on the camera. You get back about 50% of the nonverbal channel. Research shows video calls with cameras result in 30% higher feelings of connection. And here's the meta principle. In digital communication, you must make explicit what would be implicit in person. Your warmth, your intent, your assumptions, none transmit automatically. The sacred boundary. Here's the most important skill. Knowing when digital isn't enough. There's a moment when a text thread turns toxic, when an email chain becomes unrecoverable. And in those moments, the wisest choice is the most uncomfortable. Close the app and pick up the phone. Here's my rule. When I notice defensiveness, in myself or the other person, I stop digital communication immediately. Not soon. Not after one more message. Immediately. Certain occasions should never be handled digitally. Major feedback, positive or negative. You got the promotion, is a phone call minimum. Endings, of jobs, projects, or relationships. Never an email. Grief and crisis. When someone shares painful news, your first response should be voiced. Apologies. A genuine apology requires the full bandwidth of human presence. For these moments, digital communication isn't second best. It's a betrayal of the moment's importance. My personal take. Now here's where I disagree with some of what this book suggests. The book frames authenticity as the foundation of all effective communication. And while I agree that manipulation eventually fails, I think there's a hidden danger in the just be authentic advice. Here's the problem. For many people, their authentic self has been shaped by trauma, insecurity, and dysfunctional patterns. Telling someone who grew up with angry parents to just be authentic might mean they authentically lash out during conflict. I think there's a step the book doesn't emphasize enough. The work of healing and growing so that your authentic self becomes someone worth being authentic as. Authenticity isn't just, be yourself. It's, become the version of yourself worth being, then express that fully. Here's what I would add. A practice I call the identity integration exercise. Every evening for 1 week, write down. One moment today where I communicated in a way I'm proud of. One moment where I didn't. What the proud moment reveals about who I'm becoming. What the unproud moment reveals about what still needs healing. This isn't about shame. It's about honest inventory. Because the goal isn't just to communicate better, it's to become someone whose authentic communication naturally creates connection. The action plan. Here's your 30-day communication challenge. Days 1 to 7, the listening week. In every conversation, listen to understand, not to respond. Don't interrupt. When they finish, pause for 2 full breaths before responding. Each night, write 1 sentence about what you learned from listening that day. Days 8 to 14, the clarity week. Before important messages, ask, what's the core of what I want to convey? Say it in as few words as possible. Each day, take 1 message you sent and rewrite it 50% shorter. Days 15 to 21, the difficult conversation week. Have at least 1 conversation you've been avoiding. Use the break protocol and connect framework. Don't worry about perfection, focus on doing it. Days 22 to 28, the connection week. Express genuine appreciation to 1 person each day. Ask questions that go deeper. Share something authentic you'd normally hide. Days 29 to 30, the integration days. Review your journey. What changed? What practices will you continue? The ripple effect. A middle school teacher once told me this story. She had a struggling 7th grader named James. Acting out, failing classes, on the verge of being expelled. One day, she kept him after class. Instead of lecturing, she just listened. Asked what was going on. And waited. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he started crying and told her about his home life. She didn't fix anything. She just heard him. He's graduating high school this year. Got accepted to college. He sent her a letter saying that conversation changed his life. No one had ever listened to him like that before. That teacher learned deep listening from a book. Communication skills ripple outward. When you become a better listener, you change how people feel about themselves. They treat others differently. You're not just improving yourself. You're shifting the communication climate of every community you're part of. Here's my question for you. Think about 1 relationship in your life that matters deeply to you, but where communication has broken down or never quite worked. What would it look like to apply just 1 thing from this video to that relationship this week? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this changed how you think about communication, you'll want to see my next video on related topic. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Every conversation is a chance to build a bridge or a wall. The choice has always been yours.